Before we start, we wanted to give a content warning that this episode will contain discussions of suicide and self-harm. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out to a mental health professional or call the 211 crisis line. Your well-being is important. Hello friends, bienvenidos. My name is Jen, aka Jen Kahlo on social media, your local witchy friend and intuitive guide through the occult. As always, my lovely husband and co-host is David, aka Primrose on social media.
Hi everyone. On today's episode, Jen explains shadow work.
Welcome to the show. Grab a chair, make yourself at home. Jen's got stories to share. You'll never feel alone.
Again, just plugging the artiste in the house. On the 26th, we will be doing walk-ins for the special event, the art show for the ghouls, where David will be showcasing a piece of art.
And if you haven't so already, we did our Unhinged episode last week about our personal art takes. So if you want to join the Patreon and check that out, you can have a little more insight into us.
Yes, and that day, October 26th, we will be taking walk-ins until 9 p.m. with special event pricing, which is a discount from the normal rates for a consultation.
Last week's episode was a good one. We really got into it with witches in a good way.
In a good way.
Yeah. But it kind of just, not that I don't love the podcast, but I feel like I just felt re-energized and got kind of that spark again. These lively conversations and debates that we have are really good. And then to continue on the trend of like Halloween, October, today we're doing shadow work. And this is another one that I think we're going to have a really good conversation on. We've talked about it very briefly. I've gotten like a general overview, but there's going to be a lot of overlaps in your practices and my knowledge. So I think this should be a really good one to listen to, and I'm sure we're going to have some lively conversation again.
Yeah, absolutely. And just speaking of witches, quick plug, I will be at Infinity Coven in San Francisco, October 19th, if you want to see me in my other witchy element.
Yes.
But yes, let's get into shadow work. Shadow work is all the rage right now on TikTok.
Is it trending?
It is trending, yep.
I've never heard of it. The only correlation I have to shadow work, it reminds me of like the Shadow Realm.
From Yu-Gi-Oh!
From Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah, basically just a quick TLDR. It was a card game. Basically the premise was like, it's a card game, but like it has like magic powers, and sometimes if you were gonna lose, instead of losing, they'd send you to like the Shadow Realm, which in the Japanese version, it did get censored. The Shadow Realm is Americanized, but in the Japanese version, the Shadow Realm was like you were dead. So it was, they couldn't say like you're basically being sent to the afterlife. The American population was just not ready for
discussions of the afterlife.
Yes, on Saturday morning cartoons. But no, when you told me you were doing shadow work, just Shadow Realm was the only thing I could think of.
That's funny. Yeah, so what is shadow work and why is it all the rage right now? It's raging both like in the witchy community, but it's also like enraging people that are not witches.
I don't know, you'll touch into it, maybe I'm jumping way ahead, but like astrologically speaking, is there a reason why it may be coming up more, or any like planets or anything that is like guiding the conversation towards shadow?
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Perfect.
Yes.
Right.
But first, what is shadow work before we get way too deep? So shadow work is basically your self-care that you don't want to do. Everyone thinks hashtag self-care is like face mask, getting your nails done, etc. Shadow work is the tough love that you need to give yourself. Like, why have I been avoiding therapy? Why aren't I taking my meds? Why aren't I exercising? Why do I get anxiety around XYZ? Like, shadow work is the opposite of the cutesy, fun self-care that we want to indulge in, especially during Libra season right now, because Libra season is very cutesy, very demure. Shadow work, not so much, because it makes you confront your inner demons, your inner traumas, and things like that. The reason why there's some overlap is, where does shadow work come from? It really originates from the psychologist Carl Jung, who was around like I know he was born in the late 1800s and then he died like 1960s, but he was from Switzerland, and he came up with the idea of the shadow self, which is sort of like the things that we want to repress, our shadow side. He really believed, correct me if I'm wrong, but he really believed that folks, their mental health, their perception, their traumas, things like that were very hereditary and societal, and that society tells you what parts of you are good and what parts are bad, but you're born with all your parts, right?
Yeah. So just a little backstory. Kind of the biggest question in psychology. We have a general understanding now, but when the thought of psychology with like the modern psychology, the father of modern psychology is Sigmund Freud. Jung was a I was going to say disciple. No, a student of his. Full, just like take this, do it with some. With a grain of salt. He was coked out of his mind. Freud just loved cocaine and was just like, let me snort like an 8-ball and then let me tell you about your dreams. So Freud was really big about our subconscious.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a quack, but now like with modern psychology, we've kind of understood like he was onto something, but he wasn't like, the main, like he wasn't right. Right?
Yeah.
There is something as our subconscious, our psyche, our id, ego, and superego. So Jung was a disciple of that. Going back a little bit with nature versus nurture, again, like that's a hot debate. We now understand kind of in today that it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
For sure, there are some things that have some aspects that have pull or weight to them, but we understand that it's both. Jung was a little more heavy towards the nature part of it, which means like you're kind of born with it. Your ancestors, basically, this was their gift to you. You inherited all their bullshit, and like you have to work through the hands that you were dealt. Mm-hmm. So he was very strong on the nature part of it. But yeah, that's like the psychology background of it. Again, gratuitous amounts of cocaine, so take that with what you will.
Quick astrology plug, where you can see a lot of your shadow side and all the bullshit that you inherit if your ancestors are broken, leave you no financial inheritance, is the 8th house. But if they leave you financial inheritance, you can also see that in the 8th house. But anyway, yes, so really this term was adopted by folks that, believe in like manifestation and empowerment and things like that, witches, if you will. Shout out to last week's episode. And they decided, we will call this shadow work based on...
Welcome to the show. Grab a chair, make yourself at home. Gems, that story's a shame, you'll never feel alone.
Off of the premise of the shadow self, and then this is going to be another level of self-care to bring that shadow self out of the shadow into the light so we can live our best life. So what are some tools with shadow work? It could be journaling to get in touch with like your inner child and like the part of you that was stunted upon like whatever trauma you have. It could be looking at your bad habits and confronting them, like, why is it that every time I feel sad, I go shopping? Like, how can I confront that? Because it's really easy to do, again, the cutesy self-care, like, let me throw on a
treat
face
yourself.
mask. Treat yourself. Yeah, hashtag treat yourself.
Which that does have a place.
It does,
yeah.
Absolutely. Especially Libra season, it does. But, yeah, the shadow work, I feel like a good time for that is Scorpio season, which is coming up, and also next week's episode. But, yeah. Speaking of the othering, which is something that we also talked about last week, there are a lot of different ways to do shadow work. There is no right or wrong way as long as it works for you. But someone came out with the shadow work journal, which is just like, a self-help sort of like guided prompts journal that someone was selling on TikTok. very cute, whatever, do your thing. That's great. If it helps people, a lot of people had good things to say about it. But folks hear shadow work and they think like shadow realm or like the devil.
Yeah.
And so it's been all the rage for the wrong reasons, also with like non-pagan people. And they've been like, if you buy this shadow work journal, you're talking to the devil. Meanwhile, the journal prompt is like, what would you tell your inner child to make them happy and feel safe? So yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions around shadow work, but I think it's an important part of the process. As someone that just wants to manifest all the time, just like gimme, very luxurious Venusian type of vibe, like we also have to purge and heal ourselves too. So that is my delicate balance.
Yeah. And I mean, it all just kind of boils down to putting in the work, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing happens if no work is done. And you mentioned that in manifestation. I mean, aside from shadow work, I think the easiest thing that people come at you as, like, I don't want to say witch because we talked about this last week, but of a practitioner of the occult, they'll say, well, if you have all these magical powers, weren't you a millionaire, right? And they don't understand that it's like the manifestation is just the spiritual vessel for me to achieve what I want to in this life. You still have to do the work, right? Yeah. If you owned a Ferrari and never put gas in it, like the Ferrari's not going to go anywhere.
Never took it to its oil changes or like its tire rotations. That's basically your shadow work for all you car people out there.
And see, this is the beauty of this podcast. I love this. I love the concept. I totally agree. You always have to do the work, whether it's spiritual, psychological, physical. But for me, with the spiritual thing, it's like you're just taking that extra step. Just fucking do the work, right?
Yeah.
You want to like be spending this money? Budget. Like, I don't need to manifest that shit. Just fucking do it. So I think I've always thought that was the cute dichotomy of a relationship. You call it manifestation. I call it like being an adult. Do your shit.
Hey, if it helps you to label it as shadow work, it helps me, because otherwise it's like, I don't want additional chores. Yes. Let me call it shadow work. It makes it slightly easier. It's still hard, but digestible, yeah. That reminds me of like when Kim Kardashian got in hot water when she's like, nobody wants to work anymore. Yes. Same thing with like manifestation. Everyone wants to manifest money, but no one wants to do the shadow work. Yeah. And honestly, some people, and I definitely believe that like the more shadow work you do, the better your manifestations are, because then you're really in tune with your power, because you're accepting all parts of yourself.
And there are constraints. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad we're talking about this is like the crossover with like psychology. It's very easy, especially from us to say, I mean, just everything we have. We're very privileged to have what we have. Yep. So it's very easy for us to sit here and be like, do the work, but also understand and have compassion for it, and really like not take for granted that you are, if you're listening to this episode, you're probably in a position where you have the ability to do, whether you call it shadow work, do the work. But going back to psychology, if your basic needs aren't being met, you can't thrive. So there's a lot of truth to like, the bootstrap theory of like, just fucking work. Like, no, it doesn't always work that way. There are nuances and considerations. Everybody's very different. This is a generalized topic, but this doesn't mean like you as a person are not a good person because you're not putting in the work. If you don't know where your next like food, like where your next meal is coming from, fuck all this. You know? Absolutely. This does not matter, and it shouldn't matter. Like, let me manifest. No, it's like you got to focus on your basic needs, and that includes physical, emotional, and psychological, right? So in order to thrive as a person, you have to have your basic needs met, and we live in a world where that's just not true for everyone. When we talk about mental health, we're going to talk about mental health, but if you're in a place where your mental health is not aligning with you to have that ability to start even the work, like, not to say that it's not your fault. I think there's always accountability to be had, but you and I can't sit here in this desk and say like, get your shit together, if you just can't.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because it's fucking true. As my privilege has grown, as I have become more stable, like the more I've been able to lean into my spirituality. I really abandoned this when I was working like 24/7 for 2 years, when I was on call for like an emergency crisis response place that was understaffed all the time. I wasn't as in tune with myself or like anything really when we had like a short period in our time where like we didn't know when we were gonna eat. We didn't really have a roof over our head. Like, yeah, I was not spiritual at all during that time.
And again, it's not even just the physical needs, right? As a very happy and working marriage, like putting in the work for our marriage is also very important for our relationship, our unity, our symbiotic, relationship in general, and that takes work, right? And again, if one person isn't in the place to be, I think I'm getting like very like meta and philosophical, but even being in a healthy relationship is like a privilege,
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, sometimes you have to take it baby steps at a time with shadow work, and that's like totally fine depending on where you are. You don't have to like confront all those things right now if you're not in a stable place to like explore your inner child or like explore your traumas. Like, just do the little bit that you can of like, if you're very like depressed, like my shadow work is like brushing my teeth. That's the truth for some people.
Yes.
Like getting up, and like the fact that I have to like look in the mirror,
getting up,
getting up. That's some people's shadow work, and that's totally valid. Other people can go hard and like go to therapy. They have the insurance to go to therapy. They can afford the copay. They have the privilege. They have the transportation, like, or even online. They have the internet. Like, that's all privilege right there. Yeah.
And also your safety, right? We've talked about this in the past, but like, let's say somebody's in the closet, like, it's very easy to sit from a place like, well, just come out and live your true self. Like, some people can't do that. They just can't afford to do that. And
exactly.
That's valid.
Yeah. Some people might be also in the broom closet. So like, maybe you can't order the shadow work journal from TikTok. Like that's fine. Yeah. Just do the little bit that you can. And I'm just thinking of like, other sort of like witchy subjects. I've heard that a good like deity to do shadow work with is actually Lucifer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that he is a really good guy to shadow work. Him and Hecate. I've heard a lot of people that work with Lucifer, or Hades actually as well. They're like, yeah, he slaps me in the face with my budget, and he's like, why are you spending money on bullshit?
Well, yeah. I think, I don't know too much, but a lot of it is, again, I could be way wrong, you might know more, but a lot of like the satanic principles are like, do what brings you joy without harming others. And a lot of it is like, get your shit together. Like, it's not sugar coated, right? And it's like, if you have not achieved the goal that you're not doing it, are you working towards that goal, or are you just expecting it to happen?
Yeah, one of the tenets of the like satanic church and the satanic principles is actually like, make sure your body is in like pristine condition. That means like working out, that means eating right. Like, yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought that up. And
it's saying very pragmatically, like, you're not gonna get if you don't put in the work. Like, you're just not. And it talks about like, go for your goals, do whatever you can to achieve what you want, short of hurting somebody else.
Exactly.
And that is kind of their tenet. Like, basic fuck everything and go for it is, what it breaks down to.
Yeah.
So, sucks that it's associated to Lucifer, because I feel like it's not going to get as many fans, but like, that is their tenet and their dogma, if you will.
Super duper side note, I remember, I think I was like a freshman or a sophomore in college, and we were taking like I don't remember, it was like a philosophy or a debate class, and we had to do a paper and a presentation, and mine was on like the satanic church and like their principles, and we had a lot of like Christian students, and the professor had to like have my back and be like, we need to give her the respect to like give her her views and also her presentation. I was like, I'm also not a Satanist. I'm just presenting a different point of view. So
I'm the messenger here. Yeah.
Yeah. it just brought this flashback that I totally forgot about. Like, wow, I've been sort of debating and bringing these things up for a long time.
Between last week's episode and this week's episode, man, we are going at everybody, aren't we?
Yeah, we're in our villain arc.
All right, so go back to shadow work, because I think it's a lovely concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier, I don't want to forget your question. You asked, like, is there something in the stars or the planets as to, like, why we're sort of doing some shadow work? Well,
or why it's so popular, like
why it's been so popular for the past few years. I would say that two things that come to mind are that Saturn and Neptune are in Pisces. So just being in Pisces, water, emotional, intuitive sign, Neptune rules spirituality and just like philosophy, religion, and then Saturn is putting things in order, discipline, boundaries. The fact that they're both in a water sign, but they're also in the same water sign, you're getting these energies. They're not conjunct yet, but with like retrogrades and moving forward and stuff, they come in and out of a conjunction to where if you put like discipline and religion together, you can get shadow work. So that's what's been happening for the past few years. And also Neptune is in the later degrees of Pisces. So as a planet goes to the later degrees of a sign, that's like the finishing of a cycle. Neptune is in a sign for about like 14 years at a time. So we're really getting like that spiritual closure of whatever topic is ruled by Pisces for you, depending on your birth chart.
Interesting. All right. Well, like, I'd be remiss if we didn't kind of go to our format of like, pragmatically speaking, what is shadow work? What can we do? How do we set ourselves up to do this work?
Yeah, I think first is like setting a goal of like, what do you want to explore? If you don't know what you want to explore, maybe taking the time to like journal or analyze like what.
Like a vision board?
Yeah, vision board.
You know what? I used to think vision boards were like the cheesiest shit. I'm not gonna lie. I felt bad. I've never told you this, but I'm like, that is some just like fucking put up on the wall and like do it. It's like, dude, just fucking do it. But you did one. You have a wonderful one, and I walked by it too, and it's really cool. I mean, just in the human mind, we like to make sense of things. So having a vision board and just being able to check off like the things you wanted to put on there helps you. It gives you a sense of accomplishment. It gives you a sense of knowledge, in the sense that like it gives you a better understanding of like, I achieved this part of my vision board. How did I do it? Or if I haven't yet, what can I do to achieve it? Which again, I thought it was kind of cheesy, but no, more power to you.
Yeah. If you ever get a reading from me, I always love to pull a shadow work card with the Dark Mirror Oracle deck, but I always like to balance it out because sometimes it could be really harsh with a super cutesy self-care Oracle deck. So if you don't know where to start, you know, you can buy this deck. You can use a regular tarot deck, like anything to sort of point you in the right direction. But that is the service that I offer. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so sorry, going back. First set your goal. Can I say before that, this is just an opinion or an observation. Wouldn't it be best to like clear your mind before you do all this, or I don't know, maybe do a cleansing, however you would do it, but how would you describe that? Of like, it's kind of like when you're going to go paint something, right? You don't, just get like any random piece of paper. You get like a clean sheet of paper, you kind of clean your area, you prepare. What's that part of it? Like, let's go through like the steps of it.
I love that you mentioned that, because I've been like trying to figure out a way how to like weave this in here. But one of the best pieces of like just magical advice or like shadow work advice is to clean before you cleanse, because again,
I like that,
very cutesy to pull out a piece of Palo Santo and but
like my work's done here.
Not so cutesy to clean your room, to put away the laundry that's been sitting there for 2 weeks.
Ooh, I love this. Oh, people are gonna feel like we're calling them out.
Yes.
It's cool to fucking put Palo Santo, but when your dirty chonies are on the floor, like, you're not cleansing anything.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I love that.
I really do. And like feng shui, also like big principles of like cleanliness, like a clear environment is a clear mind. But I'm a big believer of like cleaning before you cleanse, And again, giving
Is that
yourself...
why that's the only time you clean?
That is not true. That is not true. But
I've lived with you for almost 10 years.
that is not true. No. But oh my god, you got me flustered.
No, but just cleansing your space. Cleansing your space. We practice that too. We talked about it in our anniversary episode. But one of the forefront things that we told ourselves was like, we're never going to record if we're not in the headspace to do it. And we've spoken about this. There has been times where we're like, you know what, we just have the deadline. Let's fucking do it. You can tell in our voice. You can tell in our mannerisms. We try to adhere to it as best as possible. We are humans, but I think we've done a good job. And that's one of the tenets that we took on with this podcast was like clear mind, happy thoughts before we even put out an episode.
Yeah. I remember what I was going to say before you tried to clock me with some false accusations, with some fake news out there. But again, giving yourself grace, like if you have ADHD, if you're in a depressive episode and you can't have like a super pristine house, if you don't live by yourself and if you don't have control, if you have kids, like pets, yeah, clean what you can and then cleanse. Like at least where you're gonna try to cleanse yourself, where you're gonna try to manifest, where you're gonna try to do shadow work, just clean that. That's what I wanted to say.
And I totally agree with the clean space. I know sometimes I fall into the habit, like the SpongeBob episode where he has to write his essay and then he just gets distracted. He's like, I haven't done the dishes, I haven't done this, I haven't done that. You usually clean when you want to put something off that you don't want to do. But
yeah,
no, I like that. So, okay, so first step is like clean slate. Let's set up the work. And then from there you said like come up with your goal or what your manifestation or your ask is.
Yeah, like the one specific piece of shadow work that you're going to focus on, because if your life is falling apart or there are multiple things that you need to fix, like it could get overwhelming, like my money isn't right, my body isn't right, like my love life isn't right. Just pick like one thing to work on at a time. And I really like I think it's called The Power of Habits. It's like a book. It has a yellow cover, but I read it and it talks about how like a habit is formed in 90 days. So, you know, that's 3 lunar cycles.
We are such simple creatures. I mean, for how complex the human mind is, we're very like, follow reward system. You'll get A if you do B. I think there's beauty in that. Like, we can program ourselves as human to like, do the behaviors we want.
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely can Pavlov ourselves. But, yeah, maybe focus on a piece of shadow work for 90 days. And then once you feel like you're kind of mastering that, then go into like the second thing. Speaking of like simple, cutesy reward system, I've seen people create like sticker charts for their shadow work. Like if their shadow work is like, again, coming out of a depressive episode, like brushing their teeth and brushing their hair, like if it gives you that serotonin boost to complete it, to like add a gold star to a chart, do whatever works for you.
On a psychological level, a lot of companies, especially with apps, that's what they use. It's called gamification. So, you know, like for example, Uber, if you complete so many rides without complaints, you can get like a badge or something. Psychologically, it is very strong to have a reinforcement saying you did good. So yeah, again, even if it's a sticker, like that was one of the things. Psychologically speaking, reward systems work way better than punishment systems as well. So
Yep.
For anybody who is like, should I punish this person or should I reward them for doing the right thing? Rewards are the way to go.
Yeah. So, and same thing with yourself. Like, for example, this happens a lot for folks that are like on a weight loss journey or like trying to do better about their eating, or it's like if they eat bad then they have to go run for like an hour. Like that's not going to work. That's just going to cause a depressive episode versus like I ate well for 5 days, now I can treat myself to get my nails done, or I can like watch my favorite show, whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I like that we're breaking from the cutesy, well, I don't say we're like a cutesy thing, but yeah, every episode up to this point has just been like, you can do this, you should do this. I mean, we talk about color magic, days of the week, but this is the true episode where we're saying like, there's more to it, and it's not all glamour, and that includes a lot of things, and you know, something that's kind of near and dear to like my heart, and it's perfect like timing. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, correct?
Yes, it is. Yep. Part of your shadow work might be like doing a self-test, especially if you were born with a uterus, doing a self-test after your period, or if you don't get your period often, every month, once a month, just to make sure that you don't have any swollen lymph nodes or lumps. If you are above the age of 40, getting your mammogram, especially if it's been 2 years, because they should happen like, you know, every 2 years. If you are assigned male at birth and you have some family history of breast cancer can affect men too, so definitely also doing a self-test, talking to your doctor.
And if you have a genetic predisposition, if you carry the BRCA gene, it is very recommended that you get on top of that. And for kind of more resources, make sure to check out the American Cancer Society website. They have all the information you need. We talked about this before the episode, but we're like, this is actually very appropriate, right? These are the subjects that are difficult to have, but that is, we're doing the shadow work of like the difficult subjects.
Yeah. And similar to, I know it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but similar to breast cancer is also cervical cancer, where like, you know, women or folks that own vaginas that are above the age of 21 and or sexually active should also get a pap smear, because that's also early detection. I remember one time I did a reading for someone, and it wasn't the shadow work deck, it was the self-care deck, but I did pull like health checkup, and intuitively I was like, have you done your pap smear? And they're like, I'm avoiding it. And I was like, I get it, it's scary, but it's important for your health, because early detection is, you know, the best way to recover.
Kind of bringing it on a brighter note, I did see a TikTok that said, if you collected Beanie Babies, it's time to get your mammogram.
Your first mammogram?
Yes.
I love that. Like, if you loved NSYNC in high school, it's time for your first mammogram.
Yes. But yeah, so that's the shadow work. Okay, so pragmatic. So clean your space, make a goal. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, you can also journal. Just
and then do the action.
Yes,
itself?
And then doing the action.
Okay.
Yeah, fine. And then creating like baby steps. Like, how am I going to achieve this action? Because it's easy to say like, you know, my shadow work is like taking a walk. But like, how are you going to take that walk? Like, having your space nice and clean, knowing where your shoes are, making sure that you buy like a nice water bottle, or that you have some form of like water, just like all the baby steps that will lead you to that success, to where you can do that.
Where does the spiritual aspect come from? Because I kind of just see it as goal setting, but like, do you do a ritual? Do you do like, is the shadow work itself, it's just that self-reflection of what I need for my life, that it's not always the most comfortable? Is that it? Is that the definition of shadow work?
Yes, but I think where it becomes like spiritual is because like sometimes people will ask Hades for help. Sometimes people will consult tarot. Sometimes people will look at their 8th house and their 12th house, like in astrology.
So if like something's in your 8th house, let's say finances, that might be the time to do the shadow work focus of like, I need to budget or something. I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, you could look at your 8th house, you could look at your north and south node, you could look at your Pluto, and then depending if you're a day or a night chart, maybe your Mars, maybe your Saturn. Like, there are a lot of different ways to sort of see like, what can tighten up in my life. And nobody's perfect. Everyone has something that they can improve, aka some shadow work to be done. So.
Yeah. Nobody is perfect, but some of us are close.
Pretty close. Like Mr. Leo King over here. Yep.
Humility will be my shadow work. I kind of also, again, this is a little bit of a shared episode, but one thing that is, well, you call it shadow work, but an example of that within like mental health or psychology. This is kind of the worst, not the worst of the worst, but like the most intense, right? There's something called dialectic behavioral therapy that's utilized to help treat BPD, otherwise known as borderline personality disorder. Somebody who worked in mental health for like almost 10 years, those cases were one of the hardest ones to work with as a caretaker, and then also as a client. There's a lot of overlap with people thinking that like BPD is also the same as bipolar. Bipolar is the notion that your emotions are, it's polar, right? You can be very euphoric or you can be very sad, and it goes up and down. And as humans, we strive for what's called homeostasis. Homeostasis means that we're right in the middle. Everything's going bad. Everything's going good. But sometimes we have a little bit of bad, but we can regulate. With bipolar disorder, you can't regulate. Chemically, you can't regulate. So you're up and you're down. Well, that's not what BPD is. BPD is borderline personality disorder. And it's a doozy. It's a doozy. A lot of it is characterized. It has a lot of similarities. So I think it's very, it can be lumped together as like, even people could be misdiagnosed with bipolar when really what they have is borderline personality disorder. People who have borderline personality disorders usually are distinguished with like impulsive actions, self-image issues. It's a lot of the fear of being left or abandoned, but then you go above and beyond to like, it's almost a lot of that like self-destruction where like I'm gonna do something so when you leave me I'll know that it wasn't my fault. You know, I'll be very self-destructive. Feeling of emptiness, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, but it can be very, very extreme. So being in a relationship, not even a romantic relationship, but any relationship, whether that's friend, family, romance, it can be very difficult. Just to give an example, I had a client who had BPD, and when I went to go visit them, the first thing they said before I met them, before I said anything, before I introduced myself, they said, "What would you do if I just started burning my hair in front of you right now?" And they took out a lighter and were like, kind of staging that they were going to do it.
Oh my gosh.
Well, look, as a trained professional, I knew how to deal with that, and you don't negate what they're saying, but you don't give into it. You kind of state the facts and say, well, like, that's going to hurt a lot. You know, I'm not here to stop you from doing that, but if you do this, the consequence of A, B, C, and D are done. What they want is a reaction of like, no, please don't do this. Like, you have to take a very different approach when working with people with BPD. And then the most effective, it's still a lot of work, and like, I don't think there's like a cure, but the most effective thing we have is, again, it's called DBT. And the reason I'm bringing all this up, because this DBT is kind of like that intense shadow work. It's a combination of like cognitive behavioral therapy, so like one-on-one sessions, group sessions, and setting boundaries, goals, and expectations. But it's very, very, very intense. In order to practice DBT, you have to like have a specialty in it and like go through like a whole training. You can't just be like a therapist and be certified in DBT. But what that looks like is the person who has borderline personality will go to the outpatient facility once, twice, even 3 times a week.
Wow,
that's a lot of work. And in that time, they're facing everything. Why do you feel abandonment? Why do you feel like you have thoughts of suicide? There's individual therapy, there's group therapy. It's just like a very, very concentrated dose of like cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's kind of the best place to work it. I did do the training. I don't have a master's, so I can't actually perform DBT. But like one of the first things that they say is just like, you know, people with borderline personalities are the first thing they'll come out with you is like, I'm going to kill myself. And not to say like you're not going to help them, but it's like you have to set those boundaries and say, I can't control what you do as a person. If you decide to ultimately like follow through with that, that's going to be your decision.
Wow.
And you saying that is not going to manipulate me into not treating you. It's kind of putting the ball in their court, but like the basis of all this, they have to put in the work. But it's just really, really, really intense. So
that is intense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the parallel with like psychology and my background of what I've done and some of the more difficult cases. Yeah.
Wow, that's intense. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's DBT, which is like the psychological, I think, equivalent of like intense shadow work.
Yeah, I love that this episode really like merged both of us, but really like showcased your specialty, because like he is such a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, I hyper specialized in crisis work. So crisis mental health was what I used to do, and you know, this DBT is like a whole plan, so that's not something I could implement like in the moment, because it has to be an agreement between the practitioner and the patient of like, we're both going to engage in this journey together. And the people who practice the DBT also have to have their own therapist.
Wow.
To because it's a lot. I mean, what BPT does, you get kind of a hyper understanding of kind of how to push people's buttons. So as a therapist, like, you're also human, right?
Yeah.
So they know how to like push your buttons. They know how to do all that. So, yeah.
Wow.
It's really interesting.
Wow. Yeah. Well, should we pull a card for ourselves, like a shadow work card, and then a cutesy self-care card? All right.
So I'll go first.
Yeah, literally, I was about to say, Benny, you could go first.
Of course.
Pull whichever one
So
calls
just
to
pull
you.
this, and then I'll show it to the camera, and then I'll read it. Oh, does backwards or forwards matter?
No, because it's an oracle card.
It says,
Atonement.
what does that mean?
All right. So basically, what are you over punishing yourself for? What are you like not forgiving yourself for? Because part of shadow work can also be forgiving yourself.
Oh, I see.
What are you being too critical of?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think as we're doing it, this is perfect. Like the, I mean, the podcast itself, I think this is something you and I both are very hypercritical. Like, you're always going to be your worst critic. And like, we set deadlines for ourselves, like almost like we're working for someone, and we forget to say we're working for ourselves and doing this like as our passion project. So the only thing we owe to is ourselves, and I know because we have these conversations, you fall into it too, just being hypercritical of like, we're not doing enough, we need to do this and we need to do that. I think I'm a little better of like reeling us in and be like, hey, look at everything we're doing, but I also kind of fall into it, like I'm not infallible.
I was gonna say, like, we joke that he's Mr. like Super Leo, but he is really hard on himself sometimes. So
that's me.
Yep.
All right, now you pull.
And then for me, the child I was meant to be. Wow, this is a very common self-care card that I pull for getting in touch with your inner child, which, I've been ignoring her a little bit, but wow.
It's funny you bring that up because we just had a moment recently. We could talk about it. One thing I pride myself is like my inner child. If you go into our home office, it's just toys, Pokemon cards. I feel like I've steered away from that quite a bit.
Yeah, you have.
I think we've just been so busy, and I hate the cliche of like adulting, but we don't give ourselves grace until like sometimes enjoying the fruits of like everything we do, and that's just life, right? It's you know, the social compromises, it's the individual compromises, it's our relationship compromises, but I always do like going back to like my inner child. And the other day we were at Costco, and there was this big like RC toy that I wanted. It was like a Formula One RC car. And I was like, I really want to get it. Like, convince me to get it. And like, what was the conversation?
I just said, get it.
Yeah.
You deserve it. It makes you happy. Like, why not? It's cool. Yeah. So I convinced him to get it, to listen to his inner child. But I need to be better about that for myself.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to pull cutesy self-care.
Okay. Cutesy self-care. Ooh, I was going to go for one here, but let me see. That one seemed too obvious. Oh, this one. All right, so I'm going to show the camera, and then this says abundance planning. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's actually manifesting with specific financial goals, which we're in eclipse season, so not yet.
Yes.
But almost.
So once we get out of it?
Yeah, in like 2 weeks.
Okay.
So very, very close. Yeah, so looking a little bit more at your finances. For some people, it could be shadow work. For some people, maybe not so triggering. I think it really just depends. And then for me, look to the stars, which is funny because I feel like I do that often, but I have felt like I've been slacking a little bit. So just getting back in touch with my astro knowledge.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that was a wonderful episode. I think we learned a lot. I love these pragmatic episodes where we're not just talking about like these more philosophical concepts. We're talking about actual like tangible things that we can do. So I loved it. I love the crossover between our knowledge base. So really good one. Coming up, we have Scorpio season, which you said kind of will lead into the shadow work. Also, my mom is a Scorpio, so I know she's dying to hear her episode. So is my brother. Yeah. And then we're going to finish up the month with comets / asteroids in astrology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. So stay tuned for Scorpio season, and also Scorpio season is a great time to do shadow work as well.
And if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Jen Kahlo or jenkahlo.com.
Alrighty, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It was a really, really fun one.
Remember, the magic within you makes the world a more beautiful place. Blessed being signing off.
Bye.